Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This time around, we're going to answer the question, what is an input? To do that, we're going to do a word web this time around. So make sure you have a piece of paper, get out 4 different colors, and start drawing your word web right now. Pause it here, draw your word web, have input in the middle, in the upper left. You'll have pictures in the upper right. You'll have examples right underneath, definition, and then underneath that you'll use input in a sentence. So pause it now, get set up, get your colors, and then come back. So I'm set up, I have my word web drawn, I got my colors and stuff like that. So we need to figure out what is an input. So what I want you to think about is just think about all these different devices that you use in your daily life, or that whether you actually use them yourself or somebody else uses them. For example, if you took the bus to school, or if you rode a bicycle to school, or you rode in a car to school. So all these different devices have inputs. If you think about the steering on a car, you turn that steering wheel, and then that causes an action with the wheels up in front. That steering wheel will be the input. So what an input really is, it's like where the energy enters the system and then causes a reaction. Now when we say a system, what I want you to think about is all these different things, so bicycle, car, bus, all these different things, they have mechanical systems in them. So when I say systems, it's like the guts inside of these machines. So yes, a bus, car, and bicycle, those are all machines. And what's neat about them is that because there's these guts, and then there's this input and output, and then there's guts between, is that allows us to be able to do things. It allows us to either have a mechanical advantage, to either make things easier for us, make us go faster, or even as toys as well, which we have a whole bunch of different examples on the screen here we're going to talk about. The first one, and one that so many of us have experience with, is bicycle. So you think about a bicycle, and I want you to think about what is the input on a bicycle. Where does the energy enter the bicycle? So what is the part of the bicycle where the energy enters it? So the bicycle, it's a system. There's all kinds of different parts, and then it's like something happens when you put energy in the input, then something happens. So what we're worried about right now, so the question I have for you, what is the input on a bicycle? So the input on a bicycle is the pedals, because think about it, that's where we enter the energy into the system. So if we think of the bicycle as a system, that those pedals is where that first starts. So your feet push those pedals, and then that causes the chain to move, and then that causes other stuff to happen. Right now we're only worried about the input. So if you think about that, the energy is entering the bicycle through those pedals. Now the bicycle doesn't really care. It doesn't really care what's pushing the pedals. It doesn't care if it's you pushing the pedals, or if it's your parents pushing the pedals, or if it's a monkey pushing the pedals. It doesn't care. The only thing that matters is that those pedals get moving, and then that causes the rest of what we want to happen with that bicycle. Next question for you. What's the input on, for example, this pull toy? So this is a phone pull toy that some of you might have seen before. When you pull it, there's an input on it, and then what happens is those eyes, they go like, it's kind of creepy, and it makes some noises and stuff like that. So what would be the input on, so think of our definition, what would be the input on this telephone pull toy? So on this telephone pull toy, the input would be the wheels. Because if you think about it, when we pull that, it's not the string, it's the wheels. So yes, you pull the string first, but the input is not the string. Because the pull toy, if you pull the string, let's say you flip the pull toy upside down and you pull that string, the pull toy is not going to work. So what the input is where the energy enters the system, and then it causes the reaction that you want to happen. We want the eyes to be all creepy and go, rah, rah, rah. We want that to happen. That's the purpose of that pull toy. So the input would be the wheels. And the pull toy doesn't care. The pull toy doesn't care if it's on the ground or if you're holding it in the air or whatever. The only thing that pull toy cares about is that you're spinning those wheels, whether you're spinning the wheels by hand or whether you're pulling it with a string and then friction on the wheels is causing the wheels to spin and then causing the eyes to go back and forth. Or maybe you hook up a drill to the wheels and you're like, bzzz, and those wheels are spinning crazy and those eyes are going like, rah, whatever. So that would be the input on a phone. So let's get our definition. Let's get our definition rock solid on our word web here. So the definition for input would be for a mechanical system where the energy enters the system. Let's start with that. So at this point, add a couple more things to your word web. So check out what I added to mine. So I got my definition here, and there's a couple more things we have to add to that definition. We got to make that definition nice and precise. We want to get it really awesome. So the definition here that we want to use is, it's where the energy enters the system, but most importantly, it also then eventually travels to the output. So the output, that's a different word that we need to know. So input and output are related. So again, so for our definition here, where the energy enters the system and eventually travels to the output. So make sure you add that little section on there. Also, I wrote my examples here. Notice how I use a different color. My examples I wrote in blue. So my examples here, I have a bicycle, phone pull toy, a vice, we'll talk about that, a clapping monkey, egg beater, Jack in the Box. So I wrote that in blue, and then in pencil I'm writing what the inputs are. So in a different color I'm actually writing what the inputs are on that. So pause that here if you need it. And then picture. Make sure you draw your picture. It needs to be at least the size of 2 of your thumbnails put together. This is, I hope you can tell this is a bicycle. So I drew my bicycle in blue, and then I'm pointing to the input on this device, the input being the pedals. Next step, let's look at a couple of these other examples. So this is an example of a vice. So this vice, this is like what would be in a shop, and what happens is that clamps on stuff. So you can, let's say you can saw it or you can sand it. It kind of like gives you a nice clamping force on something so you can work on it. So I want you to think about this. So these clamps, they close, and you have to think about, well, what actually causes those clamps to close? So answer that right now. What is the input on this vice? The input on the vice would be the crank. Because if you think about it, if you crank it, so we crank that vice one way, and then it closes the vice. We crank it the opposite way, it opens the vice. Now, we have 3 other examples here for you. We have an egg beater, so like a mechanical egg beater. We have a creepy clapping monkey. So imagine on the back there's a wind-up thing. So there's a wind-up thing, and then you let it go, and it goes like that kind of thing. And then we have a Jack in the Box. And then I also want you to think of a pencil sharpener. So think of a pencil sharpener, a mechanical pencil sharpener that would be on the wall. So think about those. And then answer what would be the inputs on each of those devices. So at this point, finish up your word web on the examples here. So finish writing the inputs of those different examples. And then for your picture, you need to draw another picture. So you should have drawn the bicycle at this point. Now draw another picture. Maybe you draw the pencil sharpener. Maybe you draw the creepy clamping monkey. I don't know. Whatever. You pick. So draw your second picture and point to the input on that. And then the last step for you is to use the word input in a sentence and write a sentence using the word input. So I finished my word web. I got my inputs for these different devices. If you notice, for the vice, the clapping monkey, the egg beater, the Jack in the Box, those all have a crank for the input. And then I also finished up my sentence. Again, so if I'm going too fast for you at any point, just pause this. I finished up my sentence. I used a sentence. I talked about the bicycle, so you have to create your own sentence. You gotta, if you use mine, that's okay, but you gotta create your own as well. And I said, the bicycle traveled forward because I pushed the input, which is the pedals. that's it for this one. Next one, we're going to talk about output. So we talked about input, where the energy enters the system, and then we're going to talk about output. And then after that, we have different types of motion. So if you think about the bicycle, the clapping monkey, the vice, all these different things, they have different types of motions for their inputs and outputs. That's it. Thank you.